Welcome to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. I'm Dr. Daniel Amen.
And I'm Tana Amen. Here we teach you how to win the fight for your brain to defeat anxiety, depression, memory loss, ADHD, and addictions.
The Brain Warriors Way podcast is brought to you by Amen Clinics, where we've transformed lives for 3 decades using brain SPECT imaging to better target treatment and natural ways to heal the brain. For more information, visit amenclinics.com.
The Brain Warriors Way podcast is also brought to you by BrainMD, where we produce the highest quality nutraceutical products to support the health of your brain and body. For more information, visit brainmdhealth.com. Welcome to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. And stay tuned for a special code for a discount to Amen Clinics for a full evaluation, as well as any of our supplements at brainmdhealth.com.
Thank you so much for continuing with us on the Brain Warriors Way. You're in a war. 20% of teenage girls meet the criteria for major depression.
It's very scary.
And we actually had a very interesting incident happen with our 8-year-old niece, who I adore, who's so cute. So we've been telling you a little bit about this family that we love and we're caring for. Tana's sister, who got her kids taken away and then reunited last Mother's Day. And at the end of October, middle of October, they came down to Southern California where we live. And we've been shepherding them. I think that's a good word. And Tamara's been doing what she's supposed to do. She's
amazing,
got a job. She actually has two jobs at the moment. But one of her jobs is she works at night.
Right.
And when she wouldn't be home, the 8-year-old, Amelie's older sister, who's very responsible and they have a very good relationship, would watch her and put her to bed. But Amelie wouldn't go to sleep. And she would
and you can imagine there's a lot of fear there and a lot of anxiety because of what had happened. So where a lot of kids, it might not be a rational fear, thinking that their parents aren't coming home. For her, it was a rational fear to some degree.
It was a rational fear because they'd been taken.
Right. And they didn't see their mom for a very long time.
And the act of being taken was traumatizing for everybody, both of the kids, for the mom and so on. And I remember, so when I heard about that she would cry, she wouldn't go to sleep. When mom got home and it's 10:30 at night and she has school the next day, she's crying and still can't go to sleep because she's so upset that I'm like, oh, well, we have to help her with that.
So this actually took me way back because a very traumatic time in my life was when I was 9 years old, so 1 year older than Amelie, and very similar experience. My mom I was never taken away from my mom, but I had a very, very chaotic childhood. And
you were a latchkey kid.
Yeah, latchkey. I always had to take care of myself. So from the time I was very, very little, I'd have to walk home, lock the doors, wait for someone to get home, which was often very late.
How old were you when that started?
I was either 5 or 6. So very young.
Wow.
So, but we didn't have a choice. When you're poor, it's easy to say that that's not safe and that's not responsible, and it's not. But what do you do when you're a very poor parent, and you don't have resources? And it was just really hard.
Yeah. So the laws are about 11.
Right.
Right.
But we were poor, and we were not in a position at times to be able to do certain things. So anyways, that's what was going on. And so my mom, at one point she got a job working very late at night. She was working as a bartender. It was her 3rd job. So she was working 3 jobs. I mean, my mom's an amazing human being as far as she is not a quitter. And she's actually today now very successful. But at the time we were struggling, and she was working her 3rd job, which was a bartending job. And so she would not get off until, 2 a.m. And so I could not sleep. And like clockwork, I would wake up, bam, wide awake. And so she would sometimes, thinking that I'm asleep and that I would not know the difference, go out to breakfast with some of the people that she worked with. And if my mom didn't get home right when she was supposed to get home, I would go into a full-blown panic. Now, to take you back, to how long ago this was, I would go through the phone book calling every single 24-hour restaurant there was and have her paged. And I'd be throwing up by the time she got home, couldn't go to school the next day, complete hysteria. So I can relate to this story that that my niece is going through. It's heartbreaking, and I still remember that panic, going through that. It's hard.
I wish I would have known you then.
I know. It's really hard.
Not sure I would have known what to do.
Yeah.
So when I heard about this, Amelie and I had actually read Captain Snout and the Superpower Questions, which is the book that I released in September. I love this book. It's about how to not believe every stupid thought you have. And so I'm thinking to myself, you need to reread this book with her and talk her through what her thoughts are and what her feelings are. And so almost immediately after I heard this was going on, I'm over their house and we're on the couch and we're reading Captain Snout. And Captain Snout is about how to eliminate the ants, the automatic negative thoughts that steal your happiness. And in her case, that were actually driving her panic attacks and her anxiety. And as we're going through, we're not just reading, we're talking about each of the pages. And when I read the fortune-telling ant, that's where you arbitrarily predict things are going to turn out badly, even though you don't have evidence for it, she looked at me in her little high, soft voice and said, "That's my aunt."
Aww. Yeah.
And so we talked about mommy won't come home, mommy will die, we'll be all alone, something bad will happen.
We'll go into foster care.
And we got Captain Snout to address each of the ants. Is that true? Is that 100% true? You actually have my phone number. You're never going back to foster care. And it was the act of going through the thoughts that were stealing her mind.
By the way, you are a good man.
That's another funny story we'll tell you someday. Because I've had the opposite be told to me. You are not a good man.
By the same person. By the same 4-year-old.
By the same 4-year-old. Anyways, after that night, she's not had a panic attack.
It's amazing, yeah.
Right? What were
I don't know if you heard the follow-up. So my sister, this is her daughter we're talking about, she told me 2 days ago, she said every single night now, Amelie insists on her reading that book with her so that she can reinforce the killing the ants. So they have to do that every night now.
Wow.
That's her routine, is she needs to reinforce killing the ants.
She needs to develop new pathways in her brain.
But she insists on it. Like it's her
that.
Routine is to do that.
Well, I love that.
Yeah.
See, that's good routine.
Yeah.
Rather than screaming and crying and not sleeping, which is another routine that is just damaging. So when you were 9, what were the thoughts going through your head?
Well, I had grown up in a very chaotic home. These girls grew up in a very chaotic environment as well.
I think they're sort of similar.
Very similar. I mean, my mom, there were some differences, but in a lot of ways, there were a lot of parallels. And so my mother, even though she was gone a lot because she was so busy working, she was the only person in my life who I didn't think was crazy, who she adored me, who she worked so hard. Yes, she was gone a lot, but I knew that she
But what were the thoughts?
Loved me. That same thing. She wasn't going to come home. Where was I going to? In my case, where would I go? There was no one else. I mean, my dad and I didn't even see him. I didn't talk to him. So there was no other stability other than my mom. So that was really it. So if something happened to her, I had no idea what would happen. And just that huge amount of uncertainty was overwhelming. It was terrifying. And everyone else in my life, forget like the idea of going, forget the idea of not knowing where I was going. I'd rather not know where I was going than to ever think that I was going with any one of them. So it was terrifying. So it was really scary.
So if you have a child in your life who is anxious or depressed, Captain Snout is just such a great book. I mean, the idea is whenever you feel sad or mad or nervous or anxious or out of control, write down what you're thinking and then ask yourself, is it true? Is it 100% true? And in Captain Snout, we go through a number of different ants: fortune telling, mind reading, all or nothing, blaming, ants. And it's just so powerful. Please don't believe every stupid thought you have.
Welcome back. So today we're going to continue a little bit along the lines of what we talked about in the last one. We talked about social isolation, and you mentioned something in our last chat about how our pro-inflammatory diets are causing a problem. They're causing people to socially isolate. They're causing people to be sick. We know that they're causing people to be sick, but they're also causing chronic pain. And we also mentioned in the last podcast that chronic pain causes people to socially isolate. So I get
so it's sort of a vicious cycle.
Right, and women are far more affected by this chronic pain issue.
Because they have lower serotonin levels.
Right, and there was a very big survey taken, over 2,400 women, and that had experienced chronic pain. And what they found was most of them had experienced childhood trauma. So more than half. And here's what they found: 44% had experienced emotional abuse, 35% bullying, 28% sexual abuse, 24% witnessed violence, 23% physical abuse, and 17% death of a parent. So there is a huge connection between emotional trauma and chronic pain. But what was really interesting is that more than 50% of those women refused to acknowledge that their chronic pain had anything to do with their childhood trauma. And part of that was because they did not want to be labeled a victim. And the other part of it was because they did not want anyone to think or tell them that it was all in their head. They were afraid that someone was going to say it's all in your head. Well, it is kind of in your head, but not in a bad way.
So what does this remind you of?
Are you trying to say it reminds you of me?
What does it? Don't you remember our
Why
first
do all of these come back to me?
conversation? What was our first conversation? January 1st,
I am
2006.
I am a bad you know what. I am so tough. You're sitting there psychoanalyzing me.
I wasn't
you're like,
psychoanalyzing
he was totally
you.
psychoanalyzing
I was just
me.
analyzing you.
Right. Same thing.
I mean, we're both psycho, so.
So you're psychoanalyzing me. You're sitting there telling me, like, you're sitting there going, well, don't you think there's a connection between this and your childhood? And I'm like,
having
no.
upper GIs from the time you were 4 and chronic pain and.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there like, no, I don't think it has anything to do with anything.
And I'm like, well, what happened when you were 4?
I'm like, oh dear Lord, I knew I shouldn't have gone out with a psychiatrist. That's what I was telling. That's what I was saying to myself. So yeah, so low back pain is the number one chronic pain reported.
So what happened when you were 4?
You mean when my uncle was murdered?
Oh. Minor thing.
Let's not go. This is a slippery slope. I mean, I'll be like.
Right, but you know what we're talking about.
Oh, I do.
Is that emotional trauma. So what we see in the brain, but it's not just the brain. What we see in the brain is when people have been emotionally traumatized, they get this, we call it the diamond pattern, where their emotional brain activates.
And I had that.
And a part of that is an area called the insular cortex. Sort of like the word insulated. It's in between your frontal lobes and your temporal lobes, but it's activated in PTSD, and that's actually where we feel pain.
So this is really important, and this is one of the reasons that when we were first dating, I fell in love with your work. Because there was no way I was listening to a psychiatrist. Let's just face it. Like I almost canceled my first date with you.
Awesome.
So let's just be honest here. I was no way going to listen to a psychiatrist. I basically thought you guys were all nuts. So, but when
There's some truth to that.
Right. So you wanted to scan me. You had your own agenda for that, for seeing my naked brain. But I actually thought it was really interesting. Like this idea of
I didn't want to fall in love with you if you were going to make my life
right.
a
Yeah,
living
this is
hell.
his own little agenda. But I actually thought it was a really cool idea, and I thought what he did was so different. But when I saw my scan and I saw that diamond pattern, I'm like, oh, like there's actually a way to see trauma. Like I was like, whoa, that's like super cool. That's when I believed you. That's when I actually started to believe you, and I'm like, okay, he's not your average like just cuckoo like dude that's just spewing. Like psychoanalyzing me.
Right. So when you see trauma, one of my first gifts to you was 10 sessions of EMDR,
which
is
I fell in love with.
Psychological treatment for trauma.
Right.
Now we have to get back to chronic pain.
But I need to finish that because it's really important. Because the EMDR was super helpful. So I started doing the EMDR, and first of all, that was another issue, is that I actually was completely against the idea of therapy. But when I started doing the EMDR, I loved it, and then I continued it for like 2 years. Why are you laughing at me? I continued it for like 2 years.
Just because it's so easy.
But I have to tell you, it was so helpful. So helpful. And it helps chronic pain. So when someone tells you it's in your head, don't take it wrong. It actually is, your emotional centers are all fired up.
Right, which makes whatever
chronic
pain
worse.
you have worse.
Right.
Right?
It's legitimate.
So if you want to learn more about EMDR, go to emdria.org and you can learn all about it. It's a treatment I've studied. I'm a huge fan of it. And it can actually decrease chronic pain because it decreases the emotional charge that's going on in your brain.
It was awesome.
So interesting story for me is when I first started doing imaging, I was on call and a police officer, his name was Steve, tried to kill himself the night before. And he had been in chronic pain. He had multiple accidents as a police officer, and he's done with the pain, and he tried to kill himself. And when I scanned him, his cingulate gyrus was freaking on fire. So that's the area of the brain. It's your gear shifter. It lets you go from thought to thought, move from idea to idea, be flexible, go with the flow. And when it's overactive, people get stuck on negative thoughts or negative behaviors. And so just by random chance, if you believe in random chance, there was an article in the American Journal of Psychiatry said that Prozac calmed down the cingulate gyrus. And so I put him on Prozac. I mean, today I'd probably put him on some nutrients that would increase serotonin in his brain. But if they don't work, I'll put him on Prozac or something like it. And he got so much better. I mean, it was just dramatic.
Isn't that amazing?
And what he said, I still hurt, but I don't think about it all the time.
Right.
So it was the
stuck.
obsessive thinking that really caused him to try to kill himself because he wanted to get away from it.
Right. So first of all, let's point out that the most common complaint for chronic pain is low back pain followed by migraines, and then it sort of goes on from there. But let's talk about, because we know we've got an opioid epidemic in the country. We know some of the more typical ways that people try to treat chronic pain, which is with medicine. Let's talk about some alternatives. We talked about EMDR, which I think is freaking awesome.
So if there's been any emotional trauma, EMDR is really important. Hypnosis, incredibly powerful.
And meditation, just the best. And they actually have found mindfulness meditation when you actually it's where you actually slow down, you focus on breathing, you allow your thoughts to just sort of come in and you sweep them away with the broom, and you don't judge them, but you increase your awareness of your body, pay attention, sort of scan and notice where it's painful, breathe into that area. You sort of breathe into the area where there's pain. So what I do is I'll sort of breathe in light, breathe out pain. breathe in light, breathe out pain. And do it very slowly. Do diaphragmatic breathing.
So hypnosis, meditation,
prayer,
diaphragmatic breathing, prayer. The supplements that I really like for pain, omega-3 fatty acids.
Things that decrease inflammation.
Curcumins, because they decrease inflammation. We have a new product called brain curcumins because we just found
and you don't like curry, so.
And I don't like curry. And SAMe. So the supplement SAMe, there are dozens of studies showing it helps decrease pain, especially osteoarthritis. And so it's better to take a holistic approach. The problem with opiates is they decrease it in the short run, but increase it in the long run.
Yeah, and the problem with things like taking NSAIDs or like Advil long term is they can damage your stomach lining. None of these things come without side effects. So, but there's also lots of other things you can check out, like acupuncture, or for me, chiropractor. I go to my chiropractor for back pain. I love the chiropractor. They do something called cupping, which I have found to be extremely helpful. I have no idea why.
Phelps did
and I have no idea why it works, but it just works.
Because it increases blood flow.
So it's awesome. And I know you're going to disagree with me on this.
I don't agree.
I know, and I know you're going to disagree because
I have no idea what you're going to say, but why not? Let's just start there.
Because he is the yin to my yang. But because it's an emotional release for me, I just love going to karate. But it's an emotional release.
Yeah, but if you're damaging bones that are damaged.
No, I have to adjust what I do, no question. But it feels really good. So if you need an emotional release, go to yoga or do something like that. But know your body, know your personality.
You know what you need to do? You need to get virtual reality glasses.
No, it's not the same.
Doing all of this in your mind.
No, you
but
need
it's
to
not
be
damaging
able. No, you need to just be able to do it.
Vertebrae.
No.
That are already broken.
They're not broken.
What are they then?
They're just sort of twisted. I have scoliosis.
Right, but didn't you say when you had the MRI that you actually had some vulnerabilities?
I have vulnerabilities, yes. I've adjusted what I do. I have adjusted.
Well, we've learned that the act of doing it in your imagination is the same effect of actually doing it. You should just try it.
No, I want to hit something.
Well, as long as it's not me, I guess we're fine. When people took our Brain Warriors Way course that's available online, significant decreases in pain because they were decreasing the pro-inflammatory diets that they were doing. Plus, they got all these other awesome ways of taking care of their brain.
Yeah. So much fun.
Stay with us.
I will embrace my many strengths.
I will not be tormented by my past.
I will find the right balance.
I will be calm and courageous.
I will be free. I am not just bipolar.
I am not just autism.
I'm not just depression.
I'm not just ADD.
I am not just anxiety.
I am not just OCD.
I am not just PTSD.
Welcome back. We have something so interesting to talk about today. There's a really cool study we're going to start with. And I've been wanting to discuss chronic pain because we've been getting so many questions. But first, let's talk about this. There is this town that has found a social cure for illness, right? This is crazy, but it's really cool. So this is in England. This was written in The Guardian. Let's read this. When isolated people who have health problems are supported by community groups and volunteers, the number of emergency admissions to hospitals falls spectacularly. While across the whole of Somerset Emergency Hospital admissions rose by 29% during the 3 years of a study. In Frome, they fell by 17%. So in one hospital, they fell, or is that a town? That's a town. They fell by 17%. A famous paper published in PLOS Medicine in 2010 reviewed 148 studies involving 300,000 people and discovered that those with strong social relationships had 50% lower chance of death across average study period, which was 7.5 years, than those with weak connections. So the magnitude of the effect of this paper reports is comparable with quitting smoking.
So being connected is critically
This is huge.
important.
Right.
And so this town actually had a very forward-thinking mayor.
Right.
And they went, okay, we can't accept the increased costs and the increased burden on individuals and society who are sick. So what can we do? So what they did is they began to surround people who were sick with services.
Which is
so
interesting.
They would help them, whether it's the money they needed help with, but they would also help them be more connected to other people in the community. So it, in many ways, is really a social cure. And
so we certainly have experienced this even in our own family.
Well, one of the things that I thought was really interesting, I wrote this, pro-inflammatory diets make us lonely and sick. So another sort of part of the study, it showed that when you have high inflammation in your body, and we've talked about that from the standard American diet, from having low omega-3 fatty acids, from having a leaky gut, that when you have inflammation in your body, which you can test with blood tests called C-reactive protein or the omega-3 index. So inflammation, one, increases threat-related brain sensitivity to negative social experiences. So you're more sensitive to rejection. You are more sensitive to negative social feedback. So you get your feelings hurt more often, which means you're then going to withdraw more from other people.
Right.
And so this crazy diet we're feeding people is actually increasing. And if you mix that with gadgets, you are increasing sadness.
Well, and there's another part to that. And it's not part of this study, but it's part of what we do and part of other studies that we have discussed is that when people eat pro-inflammatory diets, they experience more chronic pain, their joints, their back, migraines, things like this. And so they will tend to isolate anyways. So you isolate for many reasons when you have inflammation.
So they're more sensitive to rejection. They hurt more. And there's another fascinating study about when you're socially rejected, the pain centers in your brain actually go up.
Right.
So you hurt physically.
Right.
And so we're going to do another podcast soon on chronic pain. But partly the people who suffer the most are also the people who are most socially isolated.
So I want to just discuss, we have talked a lot about now this family that we've been helping. And it was, when we first started helping this family, and it's someone in our own family, it was not easy to sort of unravel the whole thing. And it's one of those situations where, it's like you've got, all of a sudden, let's just say that like you're cooking and a grease fire breaks out. And all of a sudden you got a fire on the stove, the fire catches the drapes, then it jumps over somewhere else. And all of a sudden you're looking and you're like, oh my God, like, where do I start? Okay, because there's all these emergencies you have to deal with, right? That's what it felt like for me, jumping in to try to help this. It was like, where do I start? Where do I start unraveling first, right? It was overwhelming. So when you're first starting something like that, it feels really overwhelming to try to figure out where to begin. And when there are children, especially when there's children involved. But we did that, and we did similar to what this study talked about. We just started trying to figure out resources and wrapping services around the
This
family.
family.
Right. And that's really what we did. And fortunately for us, and I would still recommend that you try to work with this, we know how to speak to certain people in certain positions, like social services, so like social workers or, CPS or DHS or whatever you want to say. We knew how to sort of communicate with them.
CPS, for people that don't know, is Child
Protective Services, right? So we know how to
DHS
communicate
is
with
Department
them.
of Health Services.
Right. We know how to communicate with them. So my suggestion would be learn how to communicate with them, speak their language. Remember, it's their game, right? It's their game, their toys, whatever. So learn how to communicate with them or find someone who does, so that you are speaking the same language rather than fighting with them. You want to be speaking their language.
Rather than see them as the enemy.
You do not want to see them as the enemy. You want to learn how to work with them.
You have to learn how to work with them.
And it's hard because it's an emergency.
I often say you need to know the rules of the game that you're in.
Right.
Right. So when I go to court, if I'm testifying in court for someone who had a scan, for example, I know they're going to attack me. It's just part of the rules.
It's part of the rules of the game.
So one side loves me and thinks I should win a Nobel Prize, which of course I should. The other side thinks I should be arrested and demonized and so on. But if you know the rules of the situation you're in, you don't take it personally. Exactly.
So when I was in this situation, everything just felt overwhelming and I'm trying to figure out where to start. You just step back for a minute. You make a list of all of the potential resources. And then you make, what I did is sort of like make a list of like, okay, I can handle this way, I can handle this way. I sort of like stepped back and looked at the whole thing and decided how I was going to handle it. And just like you said, I went, I need to know the rules of the game. These are not my rules. And it doesn't matter whether I think it's right or wrong. I just need to know how to play. And so I need to know how to communicate with these people.
Well, and you're really good at this because you were an ICU nurse.
Right.
And
assess.
Airway,
breathing, circulation.
Right?
So you've got all these emergencies, figure it out.
When you're in a difficult situation, you have to take care of the immediate needs first, right? Is there safety? Is there food?
Right.
Can we get the basic needs covered? And then it's connecting them to groups. So we stayed connected.
And that's what we did.
That was really helpful. Her mom really came in, and that was a surprise.
Right.
But I think is one of the most important parts of it.
So we got the troops to rally.
Although we needed her mother to take our brain health assessment free online. You can go to brainhealthassessment.com. We'll tell you what brain type you have and then recommend, what are the interventions, what are the supplements for that type. So she was a 3, which is worried, rigid, and flexible. Things don't go her way. She gets really upset. Mm-hmm. And there were lots of explosions. And we're like, oh no, we have to fix that. So you have to understand the biology of it.
Which was obviously part of the whole history and dynamics. So, but the point being, we were able to step back and go, okay, how do we wrap these services around for these people? And then when Child Protective Services realized, oh, these people actually want to work with us, guess what? They started being willing to help us with those resources.
They were much more helpful. Initially, there was not much help, but that's because they're used to dealing with people fighting with them all day, every day. When all of a sudden they realize, okay, they're going to work with us. Suddenly they've got, someone that they can work with. They're going to help you more. So if we just think about the social cure, it was you connecting and me connecting with your sister.
Yeah, we were but you and I were a little bit like good cop, bad cop, for sure.
Well, that's
there
how
was a check and balance.
We always are.
Right, there was a little bit of a check and balance there, for sure.
But we were connected, right? And we were not going to become disconnected.
Right.
We were connected. We were connected with the kids.
Right.
That Tamara got involved in groups and that was a connection. Mm-hmm. She got involved with work.
She did everything we told her to do.
Really a connection. But I want us to think about what is really the social cure. The social cure is if you're lonely, if you're depressed, if you have really bad thoughts, it's really important to be connected with other people.
Right, and
Now, the quality of the people really does matter, obviously. But
And she didn't want to go. So I know when you're socially isolated, it's really hard to take that first step. Really hard. I would have to be on the phone sometime with her for an hour and a half, just getting her to get up and go out because she wasn't close at the time. Now we've got her close. But I would be there, and then finally there were some days where I'm like, get up, get your clothes on, and get your blankety blank out of the house. Like, it's not an option.
what is blankety blank?
Yeah, I can't say that. But it's like there were days where it's like the bad cop comes out because it's like you have to like make it happen. Once she would go, every time it was the same thing. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I went. And I wanted to like strangle her because if you knew what it took for me to get her to go, it was a big deal. We get it. It's hard. It's hard. You need some accountability, someone pushing you a little bit to get you to go. Because it's so important that you have that support, accountability, those social services wrapped around you.
Right. So if you are feeling sick, it's so important to get the help you need, but be connected to your church, to your community, volunteering. All of those things are absolutely essential to getting and staying well. When we did the Daniel Plan, this big program at Saddleback Church that's now done in thousands of churches around the world, what we learned is people got better together or they got sick together. And it's based on these 5 pillars: faith, why do you care, food, fitness, focus, brain health, and friends. People get better together, they get sick together. People in our program who actually did it with someone else lost twice the amount of weight than other people. We want to be part of your community. That's why we do this podcast. And it's why both Tana and I are on Facebook, and we certainly have a huge community at Amen Clinics, but we want to provide you with the information you need. And our hope is, part of the Brain Warriors Way, is you live the Brain Warriors Way and then you teach somebody else to live it. Because when you give it away, it's actually you're creating your own support group, making it more likely you'll stay on the program forever. Stay with us. Use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com or on our supplements at brainmdhealth.com. Thank you for listening to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. Go to iTunes and leave a review, and you'll automatically be entered into a drawing to get a free signed copy of the Brain Warriors Way and the Brain Warriors Way cookbook we give away every month.